Okay, welcome to Karoonda. The Karoonda silo comes to life each night with illuminated artwork, which provides an ever-changing digital art canvas in the heart of the Mallee. Combined mural and projection concepts of Karoonda silo have been the first of its kind in Australia, bringing together stunning painted artwork and an art display that glows with creative spirit and pride, original images and inspirations that will continue to change with the seasons of the Mallee. So this is actually a day-night silo art where they project various pictures up on the silo as well at night. We won't be here at night, but if you are passing through this way, it might be very well worth passing and having a look at it. As it is, the silo art itself is pretty good, but so too, I imagine, will be the nighttime show. And it's very pretty what they've done here in terms of viewing area and so on. I'll get a bit closer. The lovely little windmill in the background there makes an excellent backdrop. So there we have it. That's Karoonda. Might have to make a special effort to come down one night at some stage. And of course there's plenty of other, as with all these townships, there's plenty of other art around as well. You can see here on the side of the craft shop down there various other pieces of art. And to be honest, it really is bringing some of these country towns alive. And it's certainly worth the stop. Have a bit of a look, a bit of a ponder. Yeah. But anyway, time for me to move on to the next town. And here we are in beautiful Waikerie. And there's the silo art for Waikerie with a lobster on one and some parrots and scenic art on the other. Although if we go around to the other side, you will also see some additional painting on the other side. In fact, let me just pause the video and I'll come back to you. And from the other side, the mural, down the bottom there at least, I don't know if you can see them, there's some pelicans. So let me just cross the road and you should get a better view. Just check for traffic. Should be okay. There we go. And so this is a fairly small township of Waikerie, just out from the Riverland. And because of the angle of the sun, you may not get such a good view of it. But there's some penguins there, and plenty of other creatures along the bottom. Okay, and of course this traditional Australian art back there. Shrubs, bushes, bit of shelter. But it's not too bad. And of course, beautiful dusk, coming up to dusk here in the rather small township of Waikerie.
Now on to our next stop, Peterborough and the Train Museum.
So here we are in Peterborough, Steamtown Heritage Rail Centre. And the railway officially arrived in town on January 17th, 1881. When the line from Jamestown was open. The Tarawa line was opened shortly after, and the Broken Hill line in 1887. By 1927, 1,800 people worked at the Peterborough division of the South Australian Railways, 2/3 of them living in the town. It was an industry which provided the lifeblood of the town for 110 years, and it was closed, or slated for demolition in 1988, but the roundhouse was actually saved. And that's where we are now. So here we go. We're going to also the attached visitors centre, tourist information as well. And yeah, the whole thing is a very, very large shed, as you can tell. And there's even a steam tram in the car park. Alright, let's go in and see what we can see.
In the Tourist Information Centre, there were heaps and heaps of displays of railway lines to keep us occupied while we're waiting to join the tour. And there were lots and lots of plaques to read up about all the different cars. Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating, and it kept us occupied. On the way through, we passed through the big shed where the train was. We'll have to come back and look at that later. And now, time to go on the tour. We started and joined a tour about halfway through in the roundhouse, and this was some carriages they used to repair the lines, and that's where we started. Now, I'm going to highlight a few things as we go through, but we found it a little bit difficult to keep up with the tour group. Not surprisingly, because both myself and Andrew weren't able to move along very quickly, so we ended up only doing about half of the tour, but they did invite us back to do the second half later on. Can I strongly recommend it's an excellent tour to do if you're a little bit more physically able than I was. There's lots of climbing up and down the trains, which I only managed to do too, but you'll see the insides as we go through the tour. Apologies if the guide is not particularly easy to hear. It was a case of me often being quite a bit further behind. Now this is interesting. I believe this was originally a cart to carry horses, although if I'm wrong, that's my mistake. But they'd converted it to a workshop for repairs, urgent repairs and breakdowns of trains, and so that was the workshop there that they used. And at the back of it was where they used to sleep, and so they'd often have to set up camp for quite a few days, but they'd be fairly comfortable when they needed to do so. And in case you don't believe me, here's a photograph of what it looked like when it actually was a place where the railway workers resided. You'll notice here, of course, out the big windows there, excellent view of the countryside. This is a roundhouse, so it does curve around. And like I said, lots of climbing up and down for those who wanted to do it, to have a bit of a look inside. The guide was quite interesting, actually. He talked a lot about all the different railway lines and everything, and very accommodating where he could be. So really did appreciate his efforts. It was fantastic. And yeah, just keep an eye out for a couple of things inside the trains, because it definitely was worth looking at when I did finally pluck up enough energy and courage to actually go in. I'll just turn the volume up so you can hear the guide talk about some things.
The cargo area, but because there are toilets on the insides of each of the passenger compartments, there was no way that you could you couldn't collect tickets. So if you wasn't quick enough to collect tickets on the railway station, once the train got moving, you'd have to walk along his gangplank again, knock on the window and collect tickets. But you can have a quick look in there.
I think I'd be letting them go free.
There were a couple of places where I was able to take a sticky beak inside the cabins. This is one of them.
So if you go up in through here and walk through, you come down to the other end.
And other times where I just stood back and watched everyone else have a look around. I did ask the guide to recommend which trains were best to have a look at inside, and he certainly did that. The iron on the roofs have been replaced, but the beams are original in their 1920s condition. You can also see in the bottom left-hand corner the placards that actually describe each of the trains. Because the tour was going quickly, I didn't have much of a chance to read them.
No, we saw one of these, but I'm trying to remember when it was. I can't remember.
Yeah,
You'll also notice underneath each train, once Andrew walks past, underneath each train there is in fact a pit, which they could use to inspect the trains in the roundhouse.
And she was along the track.
Here is said pit. I wonder if it's called Brad. This car was built in the Islington workshops in 1927 and carried 32 passengers. It was later converted into a healthcare card for babies and then into a vision clinic.
First door that you go in on the left hand side, that's the sheriff in the caravan. You'll see why I tell you to look at that. Then when we go around the dog leg, there's the guard's van or the guard's compartment, and you've got his and there's a mannequin of a guard in there, and he would attend to the needs of the people in the carriage. You then walk past the cold water dispenser. So they had a cold water dispenser in 44 on these things. The first compartment you see will be set up as a daytime carriage, and then inside you'll get a look at the there's one set up as a sleeper as well. So yeah, get up and have a look inside.
This is worth going up into then?
If you reckon you can make it.
How many steps? There's 6.
6.
Yeah. I've got to do at least one of them.
So let's see what's inside.
Yep.
And we're going in through the back door, and we'll just turn to our left, and we'll see the toilet. Here we are. That's the toilet compartment.
So where are you guys from?
Fairly small, of course, and then we would go into the sleeper carriages. We'll have a bit of a look. Before we do, I was very impressed with the woodwork in this carriage, and the roof, the ceiling. It was actually quite impressive. And this was the guard's compartment. Yep, lots of facilities there. And then there's the iced water facilities, which the guide was talking about earlier. And then we move on to the first cabin, which is set up the way it would look like during the daytime. And you'll notice down the bottom there, when we get down to it, there's a little silver thing there. That's actually a basin that will fold out. And the next carriage along is set up as a sleeper carriage. It's the same carriage as the other one, but this is what it would have looked like at night. And there's the basin in its form of being spread out. So that's the inside of this one, and we'll check out another one in just a moment, which is more of a lounge car. Again, apologies for not being able to hear the guard. I'll turn it up and see if you can hear him a bit better.
With the first class carriages, and then you have cattle class in front of that. This was built in South Australia in 1923. There's a sheet from the front page of the Advertiser on the day that it was commissioned, and you'll notice it was true to its word. There's not a scary good news on the front page of the Advertiser.
Yeah, no, he's very difficult to hear, but that's okay. He did recommend to me that this was definitely one to go and see, so we're going to have a look inside.
This used to be a storage van and a smoko shop that was room for some cleaners down in Islington, just north of Adelaide. When we got hold of it, we basically just had to clean it up a bit. Didn't have to do too much work, but we had to try and source the furniture. And the furniture was from around the era. Some of it was older than this carriage, and some of it was slightly newer. But all this stuff's around 100 years old. These sets, so they're pretty good. Don't lean to your right on that one, because it'll because obviously the person that sat in there, lots of people used to lean to their right in that one, because it actually, when you rock it, you'll feel it go sideways. And there's the Advertiser. Not a scary of news on it. The women were in the front, and they had a glass partition in there, so that they didn't have to be with the men who were down here, so that if the women wanted to go back to the cafeteria or their rooms, they didn't have to walk through the rowdy men or the smokers. And there's a piano in there because obviously you didn't bring YouTube or iTunes with you. You bought sheet music.
Now inside the cabin there were lots of very interesting photographs and newspaper clippings. Definitely worth having a look at, and actually inspired me to go and investigate when I heard about the train crash that had occurred not too far away. So we went exploring, and you'll see that in another episode a bit later on. And just out the windows there you can see the big shed where we came in, and that was the entrance and the car park beyond it. Here we are. This is at the end of the roundhouse. We joined the tour about halfway through, and now we're going to head off to the way station, which I thought was probably one of the more impressive buildings. So this is the end of the roundhouse, and as you can see it goes right around to the other side, and the way station's just over there, so we're just going to walk our way down there at the moment. The carriage in the middle here, this train is where the night show is, and there's a lovely ramp up there, so that was a bit easier to get up to. Let's hear what the guide has to say about the turntable.
It's powered by electricity, but if the power died, you'd be able to winch it around with two blokes in that shed there. Yeah. Okay. Up in the far corner over there, there's where the stack is. That's the old steam room. That's where before we had electricity here, used to generate steam for the workshop. And behind the sawtooth there is a workshop that housed every conceivable steel trade you could possibly have, even a blacksmith. So there were 150 blokes allocated to that workshop, and it worked 24/7.
Now you might see some signs there in the bottom middle there, and I took some time to have a look at them, and here they are. There was one describing the turntable. If you're interested in reading them, just pause the video and have a look. Then there's one about the coal tower that was used to load coal a lot easier onto the trains. Then there is one about the immigrants from the Baltics. Then there's one about the boiler house and machine shop. And then finally there's one about the roundhouse. And here we are in the way station, and apparently they took this job very, very seriously. And I can't really understand for the life of me how they used this old technology to weigh trains. You see the old weigh stations where you hop on them yourself and you can weigh yourself with 1800 scales and stuff, but this is just phenomenal that they could weigh a train in the same way. Absolutely fascinating. And that really sums up the whole museum, to be honest with you. Now we're back inside the sheds where we first came in, and again lots and lots of exhibits here to spend time on. The reason the shed is so big is because it contains a whole steam train and carriage, and also in the background there, as we turn back around, you'll notice there's also a diesel train. So there's the steam train and there's the diesel train. And now we're going to come back for the night show, and this is what it looks like at the night show. We came in the same shed, and lots of noises. I'll see if you can hear it by turning up the volume. Now, if I remember rightly, the show went for about 45 minutes and finished with this little light display at the end. Apparently, Chattanooga Choo Choo was actually the favourite song of Mr. William Webb, who was the South Australian Commissioner of Railways and was instrumental in building the roundhouse in 1924. In the next episode, we'll be out and about around Peterborough to see what they have. We'll go through the Pitchy Ritchie Pass and follow a lot of the things to see there before we get to Corn. And then from Corn, we're going to go down to Wilmington, where we're going to have a look around before visiting the Toy Museum. So stay tuned for the next episode.